Howdy! Welcome to the Whiskey Butler. I'm your host, Wesley Butler, here to serve you a little whiskey wisdom. I figured it was time to get back to the teaching in these episodes. Had a lot of fun on the road, on vacation, so on and so forth. But the nerd part of me wanted to get back to reach one, teach one, and talking about what whiskey is all about. So this is actually an episode I've wanted to do for a long time now. It's the Bottled and Bond episode. I wanted to do it in conjunction with the James Bond movie that came out, the last one that just came out. That didn't happen. Wanted to do it for the anniversary of the Bottled and Bond Act, March 3rd, 1897. That didn't actually happen, but we're still in March, and so we're getting it done now. So we're going to combine it with a little March Madness. The little bow tie here, A&M. A&M still playing in March Madness. We're in the NIT, but that's okay. That's okay. We're still playing in March. And part 2 of this episode is going to be a Final Four style tasting of Bottles and Bond whiskey. Is going to have some friends come over for a party. But for now, we're going to go to the teaching. We're going to talk about Bottled and Bond whiskey so everyone out there has a good idea of what it is before we get to the fun later on. So, as we get to it here, you may be asking yourself, what exactly is Bottled and Bond whiskey? So, funny you should ask that. Now that we live in these pandemic times and of masks and mandates and vaccines, and a lot of people are asking what the role of government should be, whether it be state or federal. There was an actual time prior to the last pandemic, Spanish flu, 1918. Or 1912. I think it was 1918. Yeah. Prior to the last pandemic, people actually reached out to the government to ask them for help on certain things. And in this case, it was some famous then and famous now whiskey distillers that reached out to the government to say, hey, we need help to actually protect a couple of things, to actually protect our products from the charlatans that are out there calling it bourbon and calling it whiskey, but they're putting all this crap in it, additives and elixirs and things that actually were not good for people to drink because it was cheaper and they said it made it taste the same. So they said, we got all these people out here that are adding stuff to their liquid and they're calling it whiskey and selling it at a cheaper price than we sell ours, which is actually real whiskey. So Colonel E.H. Taylor of the then OFC distillery, which is known today as the, anyone? Buffalo Trace Distillery in Kentucky. Colonel E.H. Taylor started lobbying Congress. Probably started around 1893, but as you know, I know from living here in the DMV, things don't get done at the speed of light. So it took about 4 years, but March 3rd, 1897, we had the Bottled and Bond Act, which was passed by Congress, which to some is known as the first Consumer Protection Act here in the United States. So you think about it, the first consumer protection law was actually a whiskey law. Yay for whiskey. So what does the Bottled and Bond Act mean? Well, it actually put some rules on what you had to do in order to be able to call your whiskey Bottled and Bond and give it that government seal of approval. So what are those things? A lot of those things still live on today. So we got the whiskey has to be made by a single distiller. It has to be made in a single distilling season. See, these are the things that back up. Most people, when they think of Bottled and Bond whiskey, they're like, oh, it's 100 proof. Yeah, there's a lot more to it than 100 proof. That is one of the things, 100 proof, single distiller, single distilling season, 100 proof. Has to be aged at least 4 years in a federally bonded warehouse. Has to be made at a single distillery. And the label, this is important, the label has to clearly identify where it was distilled and bottled and such. So that's why you'll notice that on a lot of the Bottled and Bonds, just using one of Colonel E.H. Taylor bottles here, you'll see that little stripe that goes over the top, kind of like a government seal of approval. That's where all of that came from, Bottled and Bond Act, 1897. The law's still on the books, but you might say, well, does anyone actually care about Bottled and Bond anymore? There's a lot of things that passed in 1897 that we don't either do today or care about today. I mean, think about where's your local federally bonded warehouse? Do you know? Is it down the street next to Wegmans or Safeway or Aldi? Probably not. Although you never know, it could be. I mean, this was the bonded warehouses were places where basically the government held one key and the distiller held one key, so nobody was getting in without the other person, right? So it kept those charlatans. I love that word. I don't know why. Kept those charlatans from getting in there and screwing with the whiskey. But who knows what we're doing with federally bonded warehouses today? Clearly something's going on because we got all of this bonded whiskey that is floating around out there in the world. And so, I had to ask myself, I'm like, well, Wes, why do you like bottled and bond whiskey? So my day job, I'm in insurance, and insurance is heavily government regulated. And so, I don't know, government regulations just sort of seem to go with my day job. So now it goes with my side job in this whiskey. I like that when I get a bottled and bond whiskey, it's going to be 100 proof. 100 proof now is sort of my floor on the proof of whiskey. Now, don't get me wrong. I will drink plenty of whiskey that is under 100 proof. And there are actually some really good whiskeys out there that are under 100 proof. I mean, I'm looking at a lot of them right here in the bar. I won't mention them because they're not bottled and bonds, but several under 100 proof. But I like the higher proof whiskeys. And so, I like knowing what I'm going to get. 100 proof means that there's less water in it than maybe one that's 80 proof or 90 proof or something like that. So that's one thing. Everyone's obsessed with age statements these days. At least with bottled and bond, you're going to get at least 4 years age, right? I mean, don't get me wrong. There's some very good young whiskeys out there, maybe 18 months, 2 to 3 years. But it's hit or miss. 4 years is kind of like a sweet spot. So, a lot of these, well, all of these are aged at least 4 years. Some of them even longer. I think the oldest one aged in here is probably 13 years. It's one of them. Oh, it's actually, I think it's missing. It's not up here, is it? Where is the, nope, there it is, the George Dickel. Yeah, so you get a lot of different ages in there, and the flavor profiles are different, but you just feel like it's going to be good when it's aged at least that 4 years. So, and bottled and bond whiskey you can find in all kinds of different price ranges. And so I actually have all of the whiskeys that I have here that are bottled and bond arranged. These are your higher level price ranges. You got your Leopold Brothers, your George Dickel, 2 E.H. Taylors. Side note, all E.H. Taylor whiskey, except for the E.H. Taylor Barrel Proof, which is like the unicorn of E.H. Taylors out there, all of the E.H. Taylor whiskeys are bottled and bond. So they're all 100 proof, except for the barrel proof. I got the small batch here and the single barrel. Don't have the rye, working on that. These are going to be your middle range price ranges of bottled and bonds right here. When I say mid-range, I'm talking anything from maybe $40 to $70, right? Depending on where you are in the country, depends on whether you can find it, so on and so forth. But everything in here is probably going to be $40 to $70. And then you have your quote-unquote bottom shelf whiskeys over here. But don't let the bottom shelf whiskey fool you. A lot of this stuff is really good. You'll notice that, or maybe you didn't, but this Evan Will here, the bottled and bond white label, that's actually my house whiskey. That's what's in the decanter upstairs. That's sort of that everyday, you leave work, you're like, I'm just going to pour myself a glass, when I get home. That's what this is. It is delicious, and for the price point, you cannot beat it. But there's definitely several others over here that are great for the price point. The Rittenhouse here is another very notable one in that price range. So, I talked earlier about different ages. So the Evan Williams is actually aged 5 years, but in the same Heaven Hill brand family, which I actually have all of the Heaven Hill brand bottled and bond brand whiskeys here. So we got the Evan Williams is at 5 years. You got the Heaven Hill right here, which is actually aged at 7 years. And then you have the Henry McKenna, which is aged 10 years. So even in the same brand family. We have 3 different age statements on our bottled and bond whiskey. Now the Henry McKenna and this Colonel E.H. Taylor, and I think this 1792 right here, which is actually not Heaven Hill. I'll just go ahead. The Heaven Hill ones are this one, Heaven Hill, Henry McKenna, the Mellow Corn, the Evan Williams, and the Rittenhouse. Those are the 5 in the Heaven Hill brand. But back to the Henry McKenna. So this is actually a single barrel, right? And so with a single barrel, you're getting everything in this bottle came out of bottle. This was barrel number 3,216. Okay. So everything came out of the same barrel. Can't say the same for all these other bottled and bonds. We know it was the same distilling season, same distiller, but there may have been some mixing against the barrels to get a flavor profile, so on and so forth. This is a single barrel, so single barrel Russian roulette with whether it's going to be a good barrel or not. But I feel like if you're going to play Russian roulette, playing it with bottled and bond because you had to meet all these other qualifications is a pretty good way to go. So I haven't ever had a bad bottle of Henry McKenna. Haven't ever had a bad bottle of Colonel E.H. Taylor single barrel. And then another thing that I really like about bottled and bond whiskey is that it's made everywhere, right? You don't have to necessarily go to the national brands to get good bottled and bond whiskey. They're making it everywhere. I mean, I wish everyone makes it. One of the local places here, like I said, I live in the DMV area, live in Maryland actually. Sagamore Spirits actually released a bottled and bond last winter, and I didn't buy it because every winter I sort of go on this buying hiatus because I don't want to buy things if people might get it for me for the holidays. And then by the time I was off hiatus, I went to go get it and they were out. So it's very disappointing because I like all the Sagamore Spirits stuff. But there's another local place around here that makes bottled and bond whiskey. Got Catoctin Creek in Virginia. So if we're talking about non-national brands here, we got the Leopold Brothers here in Colorado. Theirs is a 5-year bottled and bond. Actually went to the distillery at Leopold Brothers in 2021, tasted their stuff. Another distillery in Colorado that I tasted their stuff in, Laws. A lot of their whiskey is bottled and bond, but you can find it everywhere. So I didn't buy a bottle while I was there. But the Laws Whiskey House in Colorado, they have some bottled and bonds. Let me see what else we got. We have our old family, as I like to call them. So we got the Old Forester here, Old Tub, Old Overholt. Where's Old Granddad? I think that one's over here. So we got the olds are represented in the whiskey. We got some Wilderness Trail here. Is in Kentucky. They actually make 2 bottled and bonds. They make a 4-year and a 6-year. This is actually the 4-year. This is a Total Wine brand, which I feel like is in the 17. Yeah, I know it's in the 1792. It's made at the 1792 distillery, hence why I have it right now next to the 1792 bottle. So those are 2 really good ones. Here's a national brand that you don't actually see a lot of this very often. Actually, this is really hard to find. It was dusty on some liquor store shelf that I was able to find. That's the Jim Beam bottled and bond. Jack Daniels also makes a bottled and bond, but fancy that. You can only get the Jack Daniels bottled and bond in a duty-free liquor store in an airport. So waiting on my next international flight so I can hit up a duty-free shop to get some Jack Daniels bottled and bond. And I think I covered all of them here, right? I covered all of the ones that I got. Oh, George Dickel here. Good old Tennessee whiskey. That's the longest age one I have. I'm pretty sure that one's 13 years. So there's certainly a couple more out there. Well, there's a lot more out there that I don't have. I know there's some made in Oregon. Wyoming whiskey has a bottled and bond that I haven't actually been able to get my hands on. So I'm certainly in the market for that. But yeah, bottled and bond whiskey is just, it's really good. So remember, there's more to it than the 100 proof and the 4 years, but those are probably the 2 main things that people care to remember. But single distiller, single distillation season, single season, single season, single distiller, single distillery, and the federally bonded warehouse. So that's bottled and bond. Really looking to the tasting later on in part 2. We're gonna pick 4 of these whiskeys right here. I've already done it mentally. I'm going to rank them 1 through 4, and then we're going to have a showdown, I should say, Final Four style, 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3, see which one everyone likes, and then we're going to put those two together. Going to be blind, so no one has any preconceived notions about which ones of these whiskeys they like or don't like. It's just going to be straight up taste, and then we're going to figure out where it goes from there. I'm going to be on the hunt for more Bottles and Bond whiskey. You know, my goal was to actually collect as many Bottles and Bonds as there have been Bond movies, and I believe there have been 25 Bond movies. I fell short on my bottles of Bottled and Bond whiskey to match the movies. I did, however, match the number of movies that were released since I was born. I feel like that was 15. So I do have 15 bottles here of Bottles and Bond whiskey, so I take comfort in that. But anyway, don't want to bore you. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. Click the bell when you subscribe so you're always notified. We are now on Instagram. My handle is The Whiskey Butler, so check us out there. There's always updates. And once again, check out part 2 if you're not too annoyed with me right now or not too bored. There's always great fun going on. Appreciate you watching The Whiskey Butler. Thanks.